Hi, I'm Dr. David Purves, and I'm out here in the frozen north again. One of the biggest problems that I see in my clinic is that related to stress. And stress, interestingly, is one of the problems that is entirely created by ourselves. In principle, there isn't any need for us to have high levels of stress in our life, but we create high levels of stress by how we interpret our experiences. Now, you have to have some stress, of course. You can't have no stress at all, because some stress is good, it's motivating, it keeps us focused, and it keeps us interested, really. But high levels of stress are positively destructive. They capture your mind and they keep you focused on really negative, even dark experiences, and they absolutely spoil the quality of your life. So in this film, I'd like to offer a few thoughts on why stress builds, and then what we can do about it. So stay tuned to the end, because I'll be giving you some really good tools that you can use to fight stress. In the first instance, stress is the feeling or the idea that whatever you need to do is beyond your capability. You don't have the strengths, the resources, you don't have the psychological tools, you don't have the knowledge and skills to do whatever it is that you need to do, and that creates the feeling of something bad's going to happen, the feeling of threat. You're going to be exposed, you're going to get found out, you're going to be shown to be unable to do whatever it is you need to do. You're going to feel very bad. Stress, therefore, captures some of the most intense negative emotions you can feel about yourself. But it's also, stress really is threat, right? Stress always makes you feel threatened, because you might be alright today, but tomorrow it might turn out that you'll be exposed as a fraud and you'll be found out, and people will then see you as you really are, so you believe. So stress is very similar to anxiety in many respects, and the physiology of stress and the physiology of anxiety are very similar. But stress always leads to this feeling of threat that continues to roll on. And even if you don't have any stress right now, if today would be a Saturday, for instance, how would you feel on a Sunday night or a Monday morning before you check your emails from work? So stress always has that rolling component to it. Anyway, stress is entirely man-made. Your brain probably was a bit more settled as a hunter-gatherer, but in the 21st century, just the number of things that we have to do, the number of problems that we have to solve, and the number of activities we need to sort of juggle in a modern world, a modern life, is often somewhat overwhelming. And our brain really was formed in the hunter-gatherer phase of life, which lasted for a tremendously long period of time. And so we haven't really caught up necessarily to this modern kind of complex world. So, what to do about stress? Well, I'd like to offer you a mindfulness-based interpretation of how we can combat stress and what we can do about it, really. Because let's do something practical, okay? So stress leads you to feel overwhelmed. It leads you to create lots of negative beliefs and to run negative scripts in your mind. Now, there are two basic problems that we can address, and that will help you to feel less stressed. The first one is that you tend to believe what is in your mind. So, for instance, if you've got lots of negative beliefs, negative thoughts, negative scenarios about what's going to happen in the future, you tend to believe that these are accurate and valid representations. They might say, well, no, it's not that I'm a failure, I just feel like a failure and something bad might happen. Okay, but you're buying into this kind of script that something bad is going to happen. And actually, in the overwhelming number of cases, it doesn't happen at all. You just continue to feel threatened. So we tend to believe that the things that are in our mind are accurate and valid representations of reality, and they're not. The second thing is that we are somewhat addicted to busyness, and we seem to accept that a busy mind, a busy day, a busy experience is just how it is, just what it is. It's just busy, just gotta be busy, right? It's just what it is. And it isn't the case at all. So we want to have a different experience, okay? And we can use the mindfulness-based ideas to create a different experience for ourselves. Now, mindfulness is commonly talked about these days, but mindfulness, what is it? Okay, well, it's simply this. It's focusing your attention on the present moment. And it's allowing the contents of your mind, the thoughts, the images, the snippets of music, the bits of conversation, or whatever you like, simply allowing them to exist, but not buying into them, not identifying them, not focusing your attention on them. Now I generally describe it as letting the contents of your mind simply flow across the screen of your consciousness. And I actually came outdoors on this snowy day because it was snowing when I originally set up my camera, and it stopped snowing now, and I wanted to sort of suggest that the snowflakes coming down or like thoughts coming across the screen of your consciousness. So you can observe a snowflake falling and then it's gone. And thoughts are like that. Your mind's constantly busy, it can't be otherwise, and stuff comes in, you can observe it, let it go. So that's basically a mindfulness situation, right? We observe the contents of our mind, but we don't engage with them, we don't feed them, if you like, with attention. Attention being the sort of the food that strengthens and weakens, or strengthens thoughts, and lack of attention weakens thoughts. So mindfulness is allowing things to exist and not to pay attention to them, not to judge them as good, to judge them as bad, just to say, well, it's just what it is. Now, in a stressful situation, negative thoughts come into our consciousness and we grab a hold of them, we focus our attention on them. Yeah, it's going to be terrible, it's going to be awful, it's going to be horrendous, I can't believe how bad it's going to be. And that keeps that thought in place as we focus our attention on it, and then something kind of captures our attention and then the thought moves off. But in that moment of time when we've been focusing on this negative thing, it's been a very stressful, arousing and negative experience. So we have to create actually a distance between the thoughts that we're having and our sense of self, right? So I have these thoughts and they pass across the screen of my consciousness, but I am not my thoughts, right? These are just thoughts that just pop into my mind, and typically they pop into our minds simply because of practice, really. We practice them for however long we've been practicing the negative beliefs we have about ourselves, and they're just very easy and very able to occupy our consciousness. It doesn't make them true, right? So we have to use this mindfulness idea, this mindfulness tool, to allow these things to exist, because they will exist, but not to buy into them, not to engage with them, not to allow them to rehearse their arguments, and not to allow them to make us feel bad. And when we allow them just to fly by or fall down, whichever direction they're going in, when we allow them to be what they are, we don't experience the negative emotions that we normally would expect to experience. Okay? Stress is, in principle, the biggest burden of stress in principle is the feeling of being overwhelmed, of going to be exposed, the negative feeling that goes with it. When we allow these experiences to exist but we don't engage with them, we don't get the intensity of feeling. And through practice, the feeling gets less and less and less, because the more practice we are at allowing these thoughts to exist but without judging them as good or bad, or actually meaning anything necessarily about ourselves, the more able we are to feel less of the emotional burden that comes with it. So in the first instance then, we need to practice allowing the negative thoughts, beliefs, etc., contents of our consciousness just to exist, and we don't judge them. The second thing, of course, is our habitual busyness. We have to actually recognize that we don't have to be busy. Now, I understand that you may need to do a lot of work, but the mental busyness that goes with stress is a different thing altogether. It's one thing to be productive and busy and to do what you need to do. It's another thing to be flitting from one thing to another, trying to multitask, trying to get lots done. For many people that I talk to, there is in principle an infinite number of things to do. It's just an infinite number of things. When I speak to high successful, high functioning people, doing big jobs in the world, like world level big jobs, it's a massive number of things to do. They don't have enough staff, they simply can't do everything. To believe that you have to do everything, and to ramp up your level of busyness to the point where you're doing 15, 16 hours a day, just trying to do everything, that's just a killer. And actually it doesn't even make you more productive. It just means that you're trying to do lots more things. The answer to that, of course, is to focus on what's important and to put your attention there. But anyway, we have to recognize that busyness is just a habit of thought. We've allowed our brain to ramp up the number of things that we feel that we can do to the point where we're just habitually busy. And again, let's bring a mindfulness notion to this, right? Suppose we find a moment of peace. Suppose we find a moment of distance between the raging thoughts in our mind and ourselves, where we can just take 5 minutes, for instance, and just to sit in the quiet. That distance, that gap between the raging thoughts and us allows the truth and the validity of our life experience to be exposed, right? We can see that we don't need to do everything. I mean, if I talk to people, they say, well, how many things do you have to do? 1,000. How many things can you do? 100. Do you then criticize yourself for not being able to do 1,000? Yeah. Well, yeah, I do, but actually it's daft, isn't it? Because you can't do everything in any kind of situation. If you have 1,000 things to do, you've only got the capacity to do 100. And that realization, yeah, well, actually you can't do everything, right? It arises in that moment of pause between allowing the busy thoughts just to be what they are and just to like flit backwards and forwards, and that moment of silence where you can just sort of say, well, actually, hang on a minute, let's just take 5 minutes and allow my brain to do what it's doing, but I don't need to engage with it. So that mindfulness period allows accuracy, truth to enter your experience. No longer do you have to be on the treadmill of doing whatever fleeting thought pops in your mind tells you to do, and instead you can do what is productive and useful, what you want to do. You have some control over where your mind's going, as opposed to the fleeting thought being in control of you. Oh, I've got to do this, I've got to do that, no, I have to do this, no, I have to do that. Actually, take a moment. Allow the contents of your mind just to flow. Don't judge them. Not good, not bad, just don't judge them. Just be where you are, notice your surroundings, perhaps focus your attention on your breath, or focus your attention on something in the environment. Just focus your attention on it and just look at it. And recognize that whatever you focus your attention on is in the foreground, and the contents of your mental activity are in the background. And these are not the same. Just focus 5 minutes on something else, such as a breath. Breathe in, breathe out, or something in the environment. Simple as that, really. But it's the practice of doing it which turns it into something useful. Me talking about it, it's neither here nor there. I've practiced this myself for many, many years, and there was a point in my life when I spent almost 5 years doing it continuously, almost every minute of every day, using advanced attentional practices really to keep my mind focused on certain things and to allow other things to fly by. And I found it to be a life-changing experience. And actually, it turns out there's quite a lot of research to suggest that practicing mindfulness for a relatively short period of time, for about 8 to 12 weeks, actually changes your brain structures, and it calms down those parts of your brain that are responsible for stress, for chronic arousal, for anxiety, for things which are unpleasant. So, we can use mindfulness-based activities to create a different experience for you. One where instead of the world controlling you, you're in control of your experience of the world, which is just about as good as it gets, because your control of your experience of the world is you being in control. I hope you found this interesting. If you want to get some tools that you can use immediately, then please download the Panic Pit Stop app. It's on the Apple App Store, it's on the Google Play Store, it's completely free. It's called Panic Pit Stop, and it's by me. And it's got quite a lot of tools and resources that you can use to combat stress, panic, worry, and anxiety. Now, in the Panic Pit Stop app, I talk mostly about panic, worry, and anxiety, but really you can substitute the word stress because the physiology and the thought processes are identical, really. And you'll find some interesting audios that you can download. Well, they'll be on your phone, and you can just listen to them. You'll find some videos that you can use. So it's full of tools that you can use to change your life experience. So, if you want to know more, get the Panic Pit Stop app and start to exert real control of your experience rather than letting any fleeting thought control you, and that can take you to all sorts of crazy places. Thanks for taking the time to watch and listen. I'm Dr. David Purves.